our main job is to not control the world, but to control ourselves, not to get too upset about what's happening on the outer, but to always be able to manage our thoughts and reactions in such a way that we are the responsible being that we can be, that we're doing our best to do what is good, and we are responsible for our community and ourselves, but in essence, we can find peace and love and happiness in ourselves, but you cannot count on the rest of the world to do it for you. And if you take it that your job is to do what's best in the moment, managing yourself, that's the best you can do. Today we're talking about fate and free will. And it's not the free will that we're doing for your life, your legacy. This is the free will that is a question about what is mine to do, what can I control, what should I take responsibility for, that sort of thing, versus what is fate, what is going to happen anyway, I have no responsibility for. And it's a bit of a complicated topic, so I'll play dumb and just keep it really simple. There's historically, around the time of Jesus, a few hundred years on either side, there was a philosophy that was quite strong in the Mediterranean called Stoicism. And Stoicism holds that our main job is to not control the world, but to control ourselves, not to get too upset about what's happening on the outer, but to always be able to manage our thoughts and reactions in such a way that we are the responsible being that we can be, that we're doing our best to do what is good, and we are responsible for our community and ourselves, but in essence, we can find peace and love and happiness in ourselves, but you cannot count on the rest of the world to do it for you. And if you take it that your job is to do what's best in the moment, managing yourself, that's the best you can do. And so there was a phrase in Stoicism called amor fati, which is essentially to love fate, or your fate, or the love the way it is unrolling in your life, how your life is going. This idea has resurfaced again in the 20th century with Byron Katie. Byron Katie started her awakening process as an absolutely depressed person, angry, unhappy. And one day, all the thoughts that she had been thinking, that she needed her husband to be different, that she needed some other things to be different, she began to question those thoughts. And when she questioned those thoughts, she realized that those were just thoughts and they were not necessarily true. Just because she heard them, the thought doesn't mean it was an accurate thought. So when she asked a question to her normal conversation, which is, I need my husband to be different for me to be happy. He needs to pay more attention to me. He needs to love me. He needs to be kinder, etc. She asked this fundamental question, is that true? Now, on the surface, it would seem obvious, yes, that's true. Of course, a woman should expect her husband to act in the way she had thought he should act. But as she really felt into it, as she went to the second question, which is, can I absolutely know that's true? When she got down to that level, she could realize that she wasn't really sure about that. It wasn't really true necessarily that he should be different than he is. Now that began a crack in this depression, because she went, oh, well, look at that. Maybe it isn't true. I need him to be different. As she went further, she went on to the question, how do I feel when I believe that thought? When that thought seems to be true, how do I feel? The answer was terrible. Unhappy, miserable, angry, frustrated, etc. And so she went to the next question, who would I be if I didn't have that thought? And when she got to that, she realized that it was the thought that was making her mad, angry, depressed, etc., not the facts. Because she said, well, if I didn't believe the thought, I would be happy, relatively free. Things would be simpler. I wouldn't be so depressed. So it turns out in Byron Katie's examination of her thoughts, she comes to this truth that she begins to live by, which is that I don't argue with reality. It is as it is. Well, I may not like it exactly the way it is, or it may not be comfortable, but it is the way it is. And so again, it is amor fati. We are loving what is. And she's written a few books that start with that title, Loving What Is. That becomes like the baseline of her presence. If you meet her, there's a radiance that comes with her, a lightness, a happiness, a joy that comes with her, because she says whatever is happening is what should be happening. I don't argue with God. Now she will go on to expound that a little bit to say there are three types of business. There's my business, and there's your business, and there's God's business. And one of the things is to realize that if I'm over there trying to tell you what you're doing, I'm in your business. And also, if I'm over there telling God whether there should be a hurricane or an earthquake or any of that stuff, I'm in God's business. And the only business I can take care of, really take care of, is my business. I bet we can think in the last week's news how we have been in some other people's business. Right? And over the last few years, I've noticed how people have displaced some of their calm for sake of being right about other people. Something to think about. So, one of the ways we can gain control of our own experience is to question our thoughts around it. And when we question our thoughts, then we put a gap between what comes naturally, which is making judgments, and believing it. And the believing of those judgments that we make on the world is what causes our suffering. Independent of that, we may hurt, or we may not feel comfortable, or some things may be difficult or more blocked. But we don't lose our emotional peace, our sense of well-being. That is the brilliance of Byron Katie. I think she is the American guru. I think this breakthrough that you break with your thoughts, that just because a thought reigns in your head, do not become attached to it any more than you would a raindrop that fell on your car. Let it be. And so it is. So that she doesn't try to control her thoughts, she just questions them. Is that true? Am I absolutely sure that's true? What happens when I believe that thought? And where would I be if I didn't have that thought? Very simple questions. Now, in her process, she also does a turnaround, and she says quite the opposite. What if if I took the opposite attitude, would that not be at least equally true? So, for instance, let's say the sun should not be hidden by clouds. That's a mild one, right? Is that true? Well, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. And what would the opposite be? The opposite be that the sun should be hidden by clouds. Or so it could be with a relationship. This person should be nicer to me. Is that true? How do you know that's true? I don't really know. Could the opposite be? They don't need to be nice to me. Or I welcome them being unpleasant to me. or I should be nicer to them. These are all equally true thoughts. It's the one thought she had originally. And that freedom that comes to question your thoughts and to substitute some thoughts for others is brilliance, in my opinion. So there is a place where you can use free will. Now, before Michael Gadway left to go to Georgia to lead seminars for 3 months, I asked him what he thought about it. And he told me the yogic idea, that essentially when you have something in your life, it is karma, and that the karma is from previous lives or this life, but that karma is cause and effect. And so you did something that has caused an effect in this life. And there are only 3 ways to deal with it, he said. The first one is to neutralize it. Let's say you have an issue with somebody in your family. You learn how to talk to them in such a way that the issue goes away. That's one way to deal with it. The second way to deal with it is to just endure it. And many of us do that, don't we? We just endure things until it's over. And the third way is to go to a very high state of consciousness and neutralize it in that higher state of consciousness. But essentially what it says, when you have a karmic reason why things are the way they are and how you should deal with them in those 3 ways, what you're saying is that this life is not the only life, that there must be lives before that. And those lives have produced things because in this life there is no explanation. You really didn't do something. You can't name it anyway. You can't think of what it would be that would cause you to have this experience. Now, the karma can go good and bad, but essentially today we're easier to focus on the bad. So if you're having something unpleasant happen in your life, either you caused it in this life or you caused it in some previous life. Now, forgot to bring the book. So you have a philosophy that was actually the same philosophy that was actually very common in the Middle East, the time of Jesus as well. So in that time of when Jesus was there, his disciples saw thank you, how did you know? I'll come back to the Jesus story, but let me read you what Hafiz says about reincarnation. You know who Hafiz is? Look, I'm a Whale is the title of this one. We live on the sun's playground. Here, everyone gets what they want. Sometimes the body of a beautiful woman, sometimes the body of a beautiful man, sometimes the body of both in one. We used to play that kind of tag in the animal world too. Now a mouse, now a tiger. Look, I'm a whale. I got tired of land, went back to the ocean for a while. What power is in our sinew and mind that will not die, that keeps us shopping for the perfect dress? We have all heard the flute player and have kept dancing toward him. Hafiz, you have seen the flute player and cannot help but whirl. It's been around a long time, this idea of reincarnation. In the time of Jesus, Jesus and his disciples are walking down the street. They see a man who is begging on the side of the road. He's well known in the neighborhood as having been born blind. And so his disciples say, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? Now, this is a tricky question for almost anybody. And I don't really think Jesus answers the question of reincarnation in this moment. He basically says, don't worry about that. Let this be a time when I can do a miracle on him, where the glory of God can be shined through on this moment. And so he makes a little spittle and makes some mud paste and puts it on the guy's eye, and he washes it off in the pool of Siloam, and that he can see. In your life, there must be times when fate has presented you with something that is absolutely a tragedy, that has seemed as though it was not in your control, that has been around a long time, or has caused you a lot of disturbance, that you were asked to overcome. That your job, it seemed like, was to overcome this difficulty. It could be something quite personal. It could be something societal. It could be a health thing. It could be you have watched someone else suffer. But your job was to bring grace into that moment, into that situation, into that condition. That was what you were there for. You weren't there to make it necessarily go away, or maybe you were. Maybe yours was to ameliorate it, or maybe it was to transform it, but that was what your calling was in that moment. Now, if we try to knit all this together in one simple way of understanding, and it is, like I said, it's a complicated subject, and I don't think any philosopher has ever gotten out of alive without dealing with it. And since all of us are part-time philosophers, the question is, how will you take it? Now, AA has a great phrase where they say, may I change the things that I can change, and accept the things I can't change, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Pretty good phrase. To be able to walk the path of actively engaging in life, not with a fatalistic, it's going to overwhelm me point of view, and yet accepting things as they are, rather than fight against what's there and wasting our emotional and mental energy attaching to ideas that the world should be different, instead just going, so that's the way it is. It seems to be the wise path. Do not think the world has to be different for your happiness. I think 2,000 years of philosophy has proven that it is not necessarily so, that the world must be different for you to be happy, but it does not mean you leave the world alone either. That you manage your own inner life according to the Stoics' idea, or according to Byron Katie. It is nothing has to be different for you to be happy if you don't attach to your judgment. Period. You can be happy if you're paralyzed. You can be happy if you're the king of the world. Because your thoughts are not the truth. They are just the rain that is falling inside your head. Do not put too much emphasis on them. And yet at the same time, to be an agent in the world and to increase your good karma, you should do as much as you can to be on target, to have your intentions set at the highest level. Because many times you won't know what is right to do. You'll just do what you're doing. You can't figure it out. It's beyond you at that moment. The reason the intent is so important is, according to your intent, so the karma builds. As is said, the same knife that the thief stabbed you with, the surgeon can use to heal you. So it matters the intent. Set your intent at the highest level you can handle and do what you do, but treat your inside with a degree of separation from the outer. It will only go as well as it goes. It may not be a total victory. It may not be a totally successful try, but put your intention so that you build toward a better world, and set in the chain of events of cause and effect the best possible outcome now and in the future. And so your fate is determined in part by your free will. And your free will is limited to some degree by your prior fate. Just do the best you can, is like your mama said, right? Or as my mother used to say, whenever I was doing something hard like swimming, she would say, swim pretty. So swim pretty. Do your life according to that. Do it at the highest intention. Give it your best shot. And yet, do not be totally consumed about the outcome. I think it's a way of balancing these two aspects of life, that which is given and that which you can do. Let us pray. As we sit and let ourselves open, please realize that you are a piece of God in this location. Spirit has been specializing in being you your whole life. You're a creator. You're a mover and shaker. But you're playing on a chessboard that was laid down before you got here. Play pretty. Let us set our intentions to be of the highest and most honest. And let us take steps in that direction. Heal that which needs to be healed. Comfort those who need comfort. And awaken to the truth that your thoughts are just thoughts. Bless yourself. Bless yourself deeply. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.